I'm Emma, 34 years old, and my hands were shaking as I set the dining table for our monthly family dinner. My younger brother Ryan had called earlier, his voice buzzing with excitement about bringing his new girlfriend Madison to meet everyone for the first time. He'd mentioned she was refreshingly honest, but something in the way he said it made my stomach tighten. As I arranged the plates, I couldn't shake the feeling that this dinner would be different from all the others we'd shared over the past 15 years. Before I share what happened that night, let me know where you're watching from. If family drama stories resonate with you, please subscribe for more real-life experiences. Our family dinners had been a sacred tradition since I turned 19. Every third Saturday of the month, we'd gather at our parents' colonial-style house in Connecticut, where the same oak table had witnessed countless celebrations, arguments, and reconciliations. My father, a retired mechanical engineer, would always sit at the head of the table, his weathered hands folded as he listened to our updates with quiet attention. My mother, who'd spent 30 years teaching third grade, would flutter between the kitchen and dining room, making sure everyone had enough food, while peppering us with questions about our lives. Ryan, at 31, had always been what you might call the golden child. Not in a malicious way, but in that effortless way some people have of fitting perfectly into traditional success metrics. He worked as an investment banker at one of those firms with a name that sounds like a law office, pulling in six figures and climbing the corporate ladder with the same determination he'd shown as high school valedictorian. Our youngest sibling, Sophie, 28, was halfway through her medical residency at Yale New Haven Hospital, perpetually exhausted, but somehow managing to maintain her role as the family peacemaker. Then there was me, the eldest child who'd taken what my parents diplomatically called an unconventional path. For the past 6 years, I'd been building my career as a content creator, focused on personal finance, and investing specifically for women. It started as a blog, where I shared my journey of paying off $40,000 in student loans while working retail, and gradually evolved into something much bigger. But to my family, especially my parents, I just played around on the internet all day. The thing is, I'd never fully explained what I actually did for work. Part of it was self-preservation. Every time I tried to explain sponsorship deals or affiliate marketing, I'd watch their eyes glaze over before they'd change the subject to Ryan's latest promotion or Sophie's surgical rotations. Part of it was exhaustion from defending something they'd already decided wasn't real work. But mostly I'd learned that sometimes it's easier to let people believe what they want to believe. What they didn't know was that just 3 days before this dinner, I'd signed the biggest contract of my career. A major financial institution wanted to partner with me for an exclusive year-long campaign, the kind of deal that would have made their jaws drop if they understood what it meant. But I'd planned to keep it quiet, maybe mention it casually someday when the timing felt right. I dressed carefully for dinner, choosing a simple navy dress that struck the balance between put together and non-threatening. My laptop bag sat by the door, packed just in case anyone actually asked about my work with genuine interest. It had been months since anyone had, but I still held on to that hope, probably stupidly. Ryan had been dating Madison for 4 months, which, in his world, was practically an engagement announcement. He'd mentioned her sporadically in our group chat, always with impressive details sprinkled in. She came from old money, apparently. Her father owned several companies. She worked as a marketing director for a luxury fashion brand, whose bags cost more than most people's rent. The way Ryan talked about her, you'd think he'd found royalty willing to date commoners. The first time he'd mentioned her job, I'd felt a flicker of recognition. The fashion world often overlapped with influencer marketing, and something about the details he shared seemed familiar. But I'd pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on being happy that Ryan had found someone he was excited about. He hadn't had a serious relationship since business school too, focused on his career, to invest in anything that required emotional bandwidth. As I helped Mom prepare her famous pot roast, she chatted about the neighbors and local gossip, carefully avoiding any mention of my work. She'd developed this skilled way of asking about my life without actually asking about my life. How was my apartment? Was I eating enough? Had I thought about getting a cat for company? The subtext was always clear. When was I going to get a real job and start a real life? The doorbell rang at exactly 6:30 because Ryan was nothing if not punctual. I heard his familiar laugh mixing with an unfamiliar feminine voice, higher pitched, and carrying that particular tone of someone trying very hard to make a good impression. My father went to answer the door while Mom frantically checked her appearance in the hall mirror, and Sophie emerged from the living room where she'd been reading medical journals. Madison walked into our childhood home like she was stepping onto a yacht in Monaco. Her entrance wasn't dramatic exactly, but calculated in a way that demanded attention while appearing effortless. She wore a cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly groceries, paired with tailored black pants and heels that clicked purposefully against our hardwood floors. Her blonde hair was styled in one of those deliberately messy buns that actually takes 45 minutes to achieve. The handbag she carried, which she made sure to place prominently on the entrance table, bore the unmistakable logo of a fashion house that most people only saw in magazines. Ryan stood beside her, beaming with the kind of pride usually reserved for showing off a new sports car. His hand rested possessively on her lower back as he made introductions, and I noticed how he seemed to stand a little taller, speak a little more formally than usual. He was performing for her, I realized, showing off the successful, sophisticated version of himself he thought she expected. Madison's handshake with my father was professionally firm, accompanied by direct eye contact and a comment about how much Ryan had told her about his engineering background. She pivoted smoothly to my mother, complimenting the house's crown molding and asking about the family photos arranged on the mantel. With Sophie, she launched into questions about the challenges of residency, mentioning a cousin at Johns Hopkins as if to establish some kind of medical credibility. When she reached me, something shifted almost imperceptibly. Her smile remained frozen in place, but her eyes conducted a swift assessment, cataloging my simple dress, my understated jewelry, my practical flats. The handshake lasted a beat, less than it had with the others, and her greeting was notably cooler, though still within the bounds of politeness. "Ryan seems to have told me absolutely nothing about you," she said, her tone suggesting this was somehow my fault. "What is it that you do?" "Again, I work in digital content creation," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Personal finance education for women." "Oh, how interesting," Madison said, drawing out the word interesting in a way that made it clear she found it anything but. "So you're like one of those Instagram girls who post about their coffee and workout routines?" "Not exactly, I started, but—" Ryan jumped in. "Emma does her little videos and blog posts," he said, with what he probably thought was supportive dismissiveness. "She's been doing it for years now. We keep telling her she should get something more stable, but you know how older sisters are. Stubborn." Madison laughed, a tinkling sound that seemed rehearsed. "Oh, I totally understand. I have so many friends who tried the whole influencer thing after college. Most of them had to move back with their parents when reality hit." She turned to me with faux concern. "Do you have a backup plan for when this trend passes?" The room fell silent for a moment. My parents exchanged glances that suggested they'd wondered the same thing. Sophie shifted uncomfortably but didn't speak up. I forced myself to smile. "I'm actually doing quite well, but I appreciate your concern," I said, working to keep any edge out of my voice. Madison tilted her head sympathetically. "Of course you are. I'm sure it's fun for now. Playing with cameras and computers all day must be so relaxing compared to a real office environment." She glanced around at my family as if sharing an inside joke. "I literally cannot imagine not having structure and colleagues and actual responsibilities. But everyone's different, right?" My mother, ever the peacekeeper, suggested we move to the dining room. As we walked, Madison managed to mention her recent promotion, her company's expansion into Asian markets, and a business trip to Paris, all while maintaining that she wasn't one to brag. She complimented my mother's china pattern, while noting it was almost identical to her grandmother's Wedgwood collection, except her grandmother's had been custom-made in England. The seating arrangement put me directly across from Madison, with Ryan beside her and Sophie to my right. My parents took their usual spots at either end of the table. As Mom brought out the first course, Madison pulled out her phone to photograph the spread, mentioning something about documenting authentic American family dinners for her European colleagues who found such things quaint. I noticed her nails were professionally manicured in a shade of pink that matched her lipstick exactly. Everything about her seemed curated, from the delicate gold jewelry that caught the light just so to the way she held her water glass with her pinky slightly extended. But there was something else I noticed too. something that nagged at the back of my mind. The way she kept mentioning her expensive things felt desperate, like someone trying too hard to prove something. You know, Emma, Madison said, suddenly fixing me with her calculating gaze. I was just telling my team about people in your space. We had a whole presentation about the decline of influencer marketing. Brands are realizing that authentic connections with real professionals matter more than follower counts. She paused to sip her water delicately. Have you noticed your engagement dropping? That must be so stressful wondering when the bubble will burst. Ryan nodded along supportively. Madison knows what she's talking about. Her company only works with real luxury brands, not those online discount code situations. He said this while looking pointedly at me as if I should be taking notes. Sophie finally spoke up. Actually, digital marketing is a huge industry now. Emma's probably reaching more people than traditional advertising ever could. Madison's smile turned condescending. Oh, Sophie, that's sweet of you to defend your sister. But reach means nothing without conversion and brand authenticity. She turned back to me. I'm curious, what's your monthly income from this hobby? I mean, if you're comfortable sharing. I only ask because one of my friends thought she was doing well with her little blog until she realized she was actually losing money after expenses. The question hung in the air like a challenge. My parents leaned in slightly, probably curious themselves, since I'd never discussed specific numbers with them. Ryan looked embarrassed that Madison had asked something so direct, but also interested in the answer. Sophie shot me a sympathetic look that said I didn't have to answer if I didn't want to. I took a careful breath, still maintaining my composure. It varies month to month, but I do fine. This is my full-time career, not a hobby. Madison exchanged a look with Ryan that was probably meant to be subtle but wasn't. Of course it's not a hobby, she said in a tone that suggested the opposite. Everyone should follow their passion, even if it's not particularly lucrative or prestigious. Money isn't everything after all, though I suppose when you're not used to having much, you don't miss it as much. She laughed as if she'd made a harmless observation rather than an insult. As my mother served the main course, her pot roast glistening with gravy alongside roasted vegetables and her famous garlic mashed potatoes, Madison made a show of taking a small portion of everything. She complimented the home-style cooking while somehow making it sound quaint and primitive, mentioning how she rarely ate such heavy food, preferring the molecular gastronomy at her favorite Michelin-starred restaurant, where the chef knew her by name. The conversation should have shifted to safer topics. But Madison seemed determined to circle back to my career, with the persistence of a prosecutor who'd found a weak spot in the defense. She had this way of framing her attacks as concern or curiosity, making it difficult to call out without seeming defensive or paranoid. You know what I find fascinating about your generation of content creators? Madison began addressing me but speaking loudly enough to ensure everyone was listening. You've managed to convince yourselves that posting online is equivalent to building a real business. She cut her meat with precise movements, never looking up from her plate. I mean, I admire the optimism, really. But what happens in 5 years when you're 40? And trying to compete with 20-somethings who understand the new platforms better, my father, who had been quietly eating, suddenly seemed interested in this line of questioning. That's actually something your mother and I have wondered about, Emma. What's the long-term plan here? Before I could respond, Madison jumped in again. Oh, has she not discussed this with you? That's concerning. In real careers, we have 5-year plans, development goals, mentorship programs. She looked at me with practiced pity. But I suppose when you're just posting whatever feels right that day, planning ahead isn't really necessary, is it? Ryan laughed uncomfortably. Madison's just very strategic about career stuff. She's already mapped out her path to VP by 35. Maybe you could learn something from her approach, Emma. I watched my mother nod along, and something inside me twisted. Here was this stranger in our family home systematically dismantling my career with surgical precision, while everyone just accepted it. Sophie tried to interject with a comment about how medicine was also evolving with digital tools, but Madison steamrolled over her. The really sad thing, Madison continued, now addressing the table at large as if I wasn't there, is when people in these unstable gig economy jobs don't have proper savings or retirement plans. She turned to Ryan with a concerned expression. You mentioned Emma still rents that studio apartment downtown. At her age, that must be embarrassing. I mean, I bought my condo at 27. But then again, I had actual salary negotiations and equity packages to work with. The lie slipped out so smoothly, I almost missed it. Something about the way she said 27 triggered a memory. I knew Madison was 33, not the 30 she'd been implying. But I kept my face neutral, filing the information away. My mother, trying to be helpful, said, "We've told Emma she could move back home while she figures out something more stable. There's no shame in starting over." The words hit me like cold water. Starting over. As if the last 6 years had been a failed experiment, rather than the careful building of something substantial. I looked around the table at my family, searching for any sign that someone would defend me, but found only embarrassed agreement or awkward silence. Madison wasn't finished. "You know what you should do, Emma." She leaned forward conspiratorially. "Ryan could probably get you an entry-level position at his bank. Sure, you'd be starting at the bottom with the recent college grads, but at least you'd have health insurance and a real pay stub." She glanced at Ryan for confirmation. "They have that new social media coordinator role, right, honey? It's basically posting on Facebook, but with an actual salary." Ryan nodded eagerly. "That's actually not a bad idea. I could put in a word with HR. The pay isn't great, maybe 40,000 to start, but it's better than the uncertainty you're dealing with now." 40,000. I almost laughed at the irony, but I held it in my hands, gripping my fork a little tighter. Madison pulled out her phone, scrolling through something before turning the screen toward the table. "Look at this poor girl. She was huge on TikTok last year. 2 million followers, and now she's working at Starbucks because the algorithm changed." She showed the phone around like evidence in a court case. "This is what I worry about for people like Emma. One day you're internet famous, the next you're begging for brand deals that pay in product instead of money." "That's terrifying," my mother murmured, looking at me with genuine worry. Sophie tried once more. "That's not really representative of everyone in digital work, though. Lots of people build sustainable businesses online." Madison's response was swift and cutting. "Oh, Sophie, you're sweet to be supportive, but you're in medicine. You don't understand how business works." She turned back to me with predatory sweetness. "I'm actually trying to help here. Emma, have you ever calculated your actual hourly wage? After equipment costs, editing time, self-employment taxes. I bet it's less than minimum wage. That's why so many influencers end up escorting or doing those embarrassing pay-per-view sites. Desperation makes people do tragic things." The implication hung in the air like a toxic cloud. My father's face darkened. My mother gasped quietly, and even Ryan looked uncomfortable with how far Madison had pushed. But nobody said anything to challenge her. The silence was deafening, broken only by the clink of silverware against china. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from rage carefully controlled. I set down my fork deliberately, the small sound seeming to echo in the quiet room. Madison watched me with barely concealed satisfaction, probably thinking she'd finally broken through my composure. "That's such an interesting perspective, Madison," I said, my voice steady and calm. "You seem to have done a lot of research on content creators, almost like you have a personal interest in the field." Something flickered in her eyes just for a moment before her smile reasserted itself. "Just professional curiosity. We like to understand all aspects of marketing, even the amateur spaces." Ryan jumped in, trying to diffuse what he sensed was building tension. "Madison's just trying to look out for you, Emma. We all are. We worry about you being alone in that apartment working by yourself all day. It's not healthy. And the financial instability must be so stressful," my father added, his engineering mind always focused on practical matters. "At least with a regular job, you'd know exactly what's coming in each month." I looked at each of their faces, these people I loved, who couldn't see past their own definitions of success, to recognize what I'd built. Madison sat there like a satisfied cat, having successfully turned my entire family against my career in less than an hour. The woman was certainly skilled at manipulation, I'd give her that. "You know what I said?" standing up slowly. "Madison, you're absolutely right that I should be more transparent about my work. Would you all like to see some real numbers?" Since everyone seems so concerned about my financial stability. Madison's smile faltered slightly. "I don't think that's necessary. We weren't trying to pry into your personal finances." "But you were," I said pleasantly. "You've spent the last hour discussing my apparent failure to build a real career, suggesting I need to start over, even implying I might end up in sex work. So, let me show you something." I walked to the entrance where my laptop bag sat, feeling their eyes following me. Sophie gave me a small nod of encouragement. My hands were steady, now filled with purpose rather than nervousness. This wasn't how I'd planned to share my success with my family, but Madison had forced my hand. I returned to the dining room with my laptop, setting it up on the table where everyone could see the screen. Madison shifted in her seat, her earlier confidence wavering as she watched me navigate to my business dashboard with practiced efficiency. Ryan started to protest that this wasn't necessary, but I held up a hand to stop him. Since everyone's so worried about my financial future, I said, my voice carrying a strength I hadn't shown all evening, let me put your minds at ease. This is my revenue dashboard for this month. The screen displayed a number that made my father's glasses slip down his nose. $47,000 in revenue for October, with 3 days still left in the month. I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath and saw Ryan's mouth fall open slightly. Madison's perfectly composed face began to crack. That's gross revenue. I continued conversationally, clicking to another tab. After expenses and taxes, my net this month will be around $32,000. I switched screens again. This is my yearly overview. My total revenue for this year so far is $480,000. Ryan leaned forward, his banker brain trying to process what he was seeing. That's impossible. You'd need millions of followers to generate that kind of income. I smiled at my brother for the first time that evening. Actually, I have 2.3 million followers across all platforms. My email list has 450,000 subscribers. Would you like to see those metrics too? Sophie let out a low whistle. Emma, these numbers are incredible. Why didn't you ever tell us? I looked at my family, their shocked faces a mix of confusion and awe. Because every time I tried to explain what I did, you dismissed it as playing on the internet. So I stopped trying. Madison found her voice, though it came out strained. Anyone can fake numbers on a screen. This doesn't prove anything. You're right, I said agreeably. Let me show you something more concrete. I pulled up my recent press features, scrolling through articles from Forbes, Business Insider, and Entrepreneur magazine. Each headline featured my name and face discussing my innovative approach to financial education for millennial women. Here's the feature Forbes did on me last month. They called me one of the top 5 financial educators to watch. My mother picked up her reading glasses, peering at the screen in disbelief. This is really you in Forbes? But I wasn't done. Since Madison seems particularly interested in brand partnerships, let me show you this. I opened an email marked confidential, careful, to position the screen so everyone could read it. This is a contract I signed 72 hours ago with Millennium Financial Group. It's an exclusive partnership worth $750,000 per year plus performance bonuses. Madison's face had gone pale, but she tried one more attack. Millennium Financial is one of our clients at my company. They would never partner with some random influencer. I turned to her with genuine interest. Oh, you work with them. That's interesting. What division are you in again? Because their CMO, Jennifer Martinez, is the one who personally recruited me. I pulled up another email. Here's our correspondence. She mentions that they chose me over several traditional marketing agencies because my audience engagement rates are 12 times industry standard. The room fell completely silent. Madison's hands were clenched in her lap, her knuckles white against her designer pants. Ryan looked between his girlfriend and me like he was watching a tennis match where the stakes kept rising. My parents sat frozen, trying to reconcile the daughter they thought they knew with the successful businesswoman on the screen before them. I wasn't finished yet. The thing about working in digital media, I said, addressing Madison directly, is that you develop a very good memory for faces and names, especially when someone makes a memorable impression. Madison's eye twitched slightly. What's that supposed to mean? I pulled up another folder on my computer when I'd checked earlier, when that nagging feeling wouldn't go away. 6 months ago, someone named Madison Brewster applied for my signature mentorship program. The application was interesting because it was full of exaggerated claims about marketing experience and fictional accomplishments. I turned the laptop toward her. This photo look familiar. The color drained completely from Madison's face as she stared at her own application, complete with a professional headshot and an essay about why she desperately wanted to learn from me to transition out of her dead-end job. Ryan grabbed the laptop, reading quickly. Madison, what is this? You said you didn't know anything about Emma's work. Madison tried to recover. That must be someone else. It's a common name. I clicked to another tab. That's what I might have thought, except 3 months ago, the same Madison Brewster sent me this email. I read aloud from the screen. Dear Emma, I know you didn't accept me into your program, but I'm wondering if you'd consider a collaboration. I have some ideas that could really elevate your brand, and I'm willing to work for free, just for the exposure and learning opportunity. Please, I really need this break. The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan slowly turned to look at Madison, his expression a mixture of confusion and growing anger. Sophie covered her mouth with her hand. My parents exchanged bewildered glances. There's more, I said quietly. Madison, you mentioned buying your condo at 27. According to your LinkedIn, you're 33, not 30. You said you're a marketing director, but your actual title is marketing coordinator. That luxury brand you work for. They announced layoffs last week, 20% of the marketing department. Madison stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. You cyberstalked me. This is insane. She looked around wildly for support, but found only stunned faces. I remained seated, calm in the face of her panic. No, Madison. I recognized you the moment you walked in, but I gave you the benefit of the doubt. Maybe you changed. Maybe you genuinely cared about Ryan. But then you spent an hour systematically trying to humiliate me in my own family's home while lying about your own life. So I simply confirmed what I already suspected. Ryan stood up too, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Madison, is this true? Did you know who Emma was? Did you target me because of my sister? Madison's carefully constructed facade finally crumbled completely. Her voice turned shrill and defensive. Your sister thinks she's so special just because people watch her stupid videos. She rejected me when I needed help, and then I find out her own family doesn't even respect what she does. She turned to me with pure venom in her eyes. You could have helped me, but you didn't. You had all the success and you wouldn't share it. I shook my head slowly. Madison, I rejected your application because you lied about your experience and accomplishments. How could I teach someone who couldn't even be honest in their application? Sophie spoke up, her voice cutting through the tension. So you dated Ryan to what? Get close to Emma, get revenge? Madison laughed bitterly. I dated Ryan because I thought he had connections, real success. But it turns out the actually successful one in the family is the one everyone looks down on. How's that for irony? She grabbed her designer bag, which I now suspected was a high-quality fake, and stormed toward the door. Ryan followed her, calling her name, but she spun around to face him one last time. Your family is pathetic, she spat. You have someone extraordinary right in front of you and you're too blind to see it. You deserve each other. The front door slammed with enough force to rattle the family photos on the mantel. The silence that followed Madison's dramatic exit seemed to stretch for hours, though it was probably only seconds. Ryan stood frozen in the doorway, his face cycling through emotions like a broken traffic light. Embarrassment, anger, confusion, and hurt all took turns distorting his usually composed features. When he finally turned back to face us, his shoulders sagged with the weight of humiliation. I can't believe she played me, he said quietly, slumping back into his chair. She used me to get to you. His voice cracked on the last word, and for a moment I saw my little brother again. Not the polished banker he tried so hard to be. My father cleared his throat, removing his glasses to clean them, a nervous habit he'd had since I was young. Emma, these numbers you showed us, is this real? You're really making $500,000 a year? I nodded, closing my laptop gently. Actually, with the new Millennium contract, it'll be closer to 1.2 million next year. My mother's hand flew to her chest. But you live in that small apartment. You drive a 5-year-old Honda. You shop at Target. Because I invest most of it, Mom. I have a portfolio worth 1.8 million. I'm actually in the process of buying a building downtown to convert into a production studio. The closing is next month. Sophie laughed, but it wasn't mocking. It was delighted, amazed. You've been secretly wealthy this whole time while we've been trying to set you up with IT guys and suggesting you move back home. Not secretly wealthy, I corrected. Just quiet about it. There's a difference between hiding success and not broadcasting it to people who've made it clear they don't value what you do. Ryan flinched at that, and my parents exchanged guilty looks. The truth of my words settled over the table like dust after an explosion coating everything with uncomfortable reality. My father was the first to speak, his engineer's mind working through the data. We failed you. We completely failed to understand or support what you were building. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We kept comparing you to Ryan and Sophie, thinking you were lost, needing guidance. But you were never lost, were you? I felt my own eyes burning, years of frustration and hurt bubbling to the surface. No, I wasn't lost. I was just taking a path you couldn't recognize as valid. Every family dinner for the past 3 years has included at least one suggestion that I get a real job. Do you know what that felt like? Ryan rubbed his face with both hands. God, Emma, I'm such an ass. I brought Madison here specifically because I thought she'd be impressed by how successful I was compared to my struggling older sister. He laughed bitterly. Turns out she already knew exactly who you were and was using me to get to you. She probably Googled our family after you started dating, I said gently. Found out we were related, saw an opportunity. I'm sorry, Ryan. You didn't deserve to be used like that. Sophie reached over to squeeze my hand. Can I ask why you never corrected us? Why let us think you were struggling? I thought about how to answer that. How to explain years of dinners where my work was dismissed before I could even describe it. At first I tried. Remember 3 years ago when I hit 100,000 followers? I was so excited to share it. But Dad asked if that meant I could finally afford health insurance, and Mom suggested I use my platform to find a husband. After a while, it became easier to just let you believe what you wanted. My mother winced at the memory. We really said those things. You said worse, I admitted. When Forbes first reached out for an interview, I called you immediately. You asked if I was sure it wasn't a scam and suggested I have Ryan look over any contracts so I didn't get taken advantage of. The weight of their dismissiveness over the years seemed to physically press down on my parents. They aged in front of me, confronted with their own prejudices and assumptions. Ryan suddenly stood up, pacing to the window. You know what the really messed up part is? At my bank, we have entire teams dedicated to influencer partnerships and digital marketing strategies. We pay consultants hundreds of thousands to tell us how to reach the audiences you've already built. He turned back to me. My own sister is doing exactly what major corporations are desperate to figure out, and I called it playing on the internet. Sophie, ever the mediator, tried to lighten the mood slightly. Well, at least Madison revealed the truth, even if she didn't mean to. Silver lining. I actually laughed at that. Trust Sophie to find the bright side of a disaster. Though there was something else about Madison that bothered me. I pulled out my phone, did a quick search, and found what I was looking for. Oh, wow. What Ryan asked, returning to the table. Those designer items she was wearing, I found the exact pieces on a rental site. The bag alone would be $300 a month to rent. The shoes another 100. She's probably in significant debt trying to maintain that image. My father frowned at this information. She told Ryan her family had money, said her father owned companies. I did some research on that too when I recognized her. Her father owns a small plumbing business in New Jersey. Nothing wrong with that, but it's hardly the empire she implied. Ryan laughed, but it was hollow. So everything about her was a lie. The wealth, the success, even her interest in me. He looked at me with something I rarely saw from my brother. Genuine respect. And you knew all this, but still gave her a chance to be decent tonight. I shrugged. People are complex. Maybe she genuinely cared about you despite her other motivations. But when she spent an hour trying to humiliate me while lying about her own life, I couldn't stay quiet anymore. My mother stood up, walking around the table to where I sat. She pulled me into a fierce hug, the kind she used to give when I was young and had a bad day at school. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. We've been terrible parents. You built something amazing and we couldn't see it because it didn't look like what we expected success to be. My father joined us, his arms wrapping around both of us. You're the strongest one in this family, Emma. You succeeded without our support, without recognition, without praise. That takes a kind of courage I don't think I have. Sophie and Ryan joined the hug, and for a moment we were just a family again, flawed and imperfect, but trying to do better. When we finally separated, everyone's eyes were a little red. Ryan's phone buzzed. He looked at it and laughed incredulously. She blocked me on everything and sent one last message saying I'm too middle class for her standards. After everything that just happened, she's still maintaining the act. Let her go, I advised. She's trapped in a prison of her own making, trying to be someone she's not. That's exhausting and ultimately unsustainable. My mother returned to her chair, but pulled it closer to mine. Will you tell us about your work? Really tell us. We want to understand. So I did. For the next 2 hours, I explained how I'd built my platform, the strategy behind content creation, the importance of authenticity in connecting with audiences. I showed them campaigns I'd run, the courses I'd created, the thousands of messages from women who'd said my content helped them take control of their finances. My father asked questions about analytics and conversion rates. My mother wanted to know about the women I was helping. Sophie was fascinated by the psychology of building trust with an online audience. Even Ryan, humbled by the evening's revelations, asked thoughtful questions about scaling and sustainability. By the time we finished talking, the pot roast had gone cold and the candles had burned low. But something had shifted fundamentally in our family dynamic. The hierarchy we'd all accepted without question had been revealed as an illusion. Sophie raised her water glass. To Emma, the family success story we were too blind to see. Everyone raised their glasses, but I stopped them. Actually, let's toast to something else. To families brave enough to admit when they're wrong and start over. To starting over, they echoed. And for the first time in years, I felt truly seen by the people who mattered most. 3 months later, I stood in my new studio space watching the contractors install the final pieces of equipment. The building renovation had been completed ahead of schedule, and my team of 12 employees was settling into their offices. The exposed brick walls and industrial windows created the perfect backdrop for content creation, a far cry from the corner of my apartment where I'd filmed videos for years. Ryan had visited the week before, bringing coffee and an apology that had been brewing since that dinner. We'd talked for hours about his tendency to measure worth by traditional metrics, a habit he'd inherited from our parents and reinforced through his banking career. He'd started seeing a therapist to work through his issues with external validation, something Madison had exploited expertly. The funny thing about Madison was that she'd actually done our family a favor. Without her cruel performance that night, we might have continued our dance of dismissal and quiet resentment for years. Sometimes it takes an outsider's manipulation to reveal the dysfunction that's been hiding in plain sight. My parents had become my biggest supporters, almost overcorrecting in their enthusiasm. My mother had started watching every video I posted, leaving comments that were embarrassingly supportive, but genuinely sweet. My father had taken it upon himself to learn about digital marketing, sending me articles he found interesting, with notes about how they might apply to my business. The shift from dismissal to almost overwhelming interest took some adjustment, but I appreciated their effort to understand my world. Sophie and I had grown closer through the whole experience. She'd confided that she'd always admired my independence, but had been afraid to voice support when the rest of the family seemed unified in their concern. We'd started a collaboration where she provided medical expertise for my content about financial wellness and stress management. Her insights had added a new dimension to my platform, and my audience loved the sister dynamic we brought to the videos. The Millennium Financial Contract had exceeded all projections. Jennifer Martinez and I had developed a strong professional relationship, and she'd mentioned that Madison's company had been dropped from their vendor list after some questionable billing practices were discovered. I didn't take pleasure in Madison's misfortune, but there was a certain poetic justice to it. I'd received an email from Madison about a month after the dinner. It was long, rambling, and shifted between apology and accusation. She claimed I'd ruined her life by exposing her, that Ryan had told people in their social circle about her deception, and that she'd had to move back to New Jersey with her parents. She ended by asking if I would reconsider her application for my mentorship program, promising she would be completely honest this time. I'd struggled with how to respond. Part of me felt sorry for her, trapped in a cycle of pretending to be someone she wasn't. But I also recognized that she hadn't learned from the experience, still looking for shortcuts to success rather than doing the actual work. I sent a brief reply suggesting she focus on building genuine skills and authentic connections before seeking mentorship. I never heard from her again. The most significant change was in how I approached my own success. I'd spent so long minimizing my achievements to avoid judgment that I'd forgotten to celebrate them. Now, I shared my wins openly, not to boast, but to own my journey. My content had become even more authentic as I stopped hiding parts of my story to make others comfortable. The monthly family dinners continued, but they felt different now. Instead of the subtle hierarchy we'd maintained for years, with Ryan's corporate success at the top, and my work dismissed as a hobby, we celebrated each other's achievements equally. Sophie's successful surgery, Ryan's project completion, my latest campaign launch, they all received the same enthusiasm and support. During our most recent dinner, Ryan had brought his new girlfriend Amy, a software developer who ran her own consulting firm. She and I had immediately connected over the challenges of entrepreneurship. Ryan had introduced me with obvious pride as his successful sister, who built a media empire a far cry from how he'd previously described my work. As I stood in my new studio preparing to film my first video in the space, I thought about that painful dinner 3 months ago. The humiliation had been real, the hurt deep, but it had also been necessary. Sometimes we need someone to attack our foundations to realize how strong they actually are. I'd learned that keeping quiet about success doesn't protect you from jealousy or judgment. It just gives others permission to define your worth for you. Madison, in her desperate attempt to elevate herself by diminishing me, had actually freed me from the prison of other people's perceptions. The truth about success is that it doesn't always look like what we expect. It's not always a corner office or a corporate title or a luxury car. Sometimes it's a woman in her 30s filming videos in her apartment building something valuable that helps thousands of people. Sometimes it's the courage to pursue your path, even when your own family doesn't understand it. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. It was a screenshot of a LinkedIn post where he'd shared one of my recent videos with a caption about learning from his sister's entrepreneurial journey. The comments were full of his banking colleagues expressing surprise and admiration. I smiled at the reversal, remembering when he used to be embarrassed by my work. Sophie had texted too a photo from her hospital break room, where several colleagues were watching my latest video on their phones. She'd become my unofficial ambassador in the medical community, recommending my content to stressed residents dealing with student loan debt. Looking around my studio at the team preparing for our day's production schedule at the wall, displaying magazine covers featuring my story, I realized something important. That dinner with Madison hadn't revealed my success to my family. It had revealed their inability to see what had been in front of them all along. But more importantly, it had shown me that I didn't need their validation to be successful. I'd already built something remarkable while they weren't watching. The camera light turned red, and I began filming, speaking to the millions of women who followed my journey. My opening was the same as always, warm and authentic, but now it carried an extra layer of confidence. I no longer apologized for taking up space or minimized my expertise to seem relatable. I stood fully in my power, aware of my worth, unashamed of my success. That dinner taught me that keeping quiet about success to avoid jealousy only gives others permission to diminish you. Now I speak my truth not to boast, but to own my journey. Because if you don't tell your story, someone else will write it for you, and they rarely get it right. The irony wasn't lost on me that Madison, who tried so hard to expose me as a failure, had instead exposed herself while revealing my success to the very people whose approval I'd stopped seeking. In trying to humiliate me, she'd freed me from the last chains of external validation. As I wrapped up filming and prepared for a meeting with potential investors interested in helping me scale internationally, I felt grateful for that painful dinner. Not for Madison's cruelty, but for the clarity it brought. Sometimes the worst moments become the catalyst for the best changes. My family had learned to see me, but more importantly, I'd learned to be seen. And that visibility, that ownership of my accomplishments, that refusal to shrink myself for others' comfort, that was the real success story. What started as a dinner designed to humiliate me had become the moment my family finally understood that success doesn't always wear a suit to an office. Sometimes it wears a simple dress to a family dinner and builds an empire while everyone's looking the other way. The truth Madison had shown them wasn't the failure she'd expected to reveal. It was the success they'd been too blind to see. And in the end, that revelation had changed everything, not just for me, but for all of us. My phone lit up with a notification. Another brand wanted to partner with me, another opportunity to grow, another chance to help women take control of their financial futures. I smiled. Thinking of Madison somewhere in New Jersey, still probably checking my social media, watching my continued rise while her carefully constructed facade lay in ruins. Success, I'd learned, isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And that night at dinner, when Madison tried to tear me down, she'd simply given me the opportunity to show everyone, including myself, just how high I'd already climbed. The studio hummed with productive energy as my team worked on various projects. This was what I'd built quietly, consistently, without fanfare or family approval. And now that it was in the open, acknowledged and celebrated, it felt even more real, even more mine. That's the thing about truth. It doesn't need defending, it just needs revealing. And sometimes it takes someone like Madison, desperate and deceptive, to force that revelation into the light. Thank you for watching my story. Have you ever had someone try to diminish your achievements only to reveal their own insecurities? How did your family react when they discovered something unexpected about you? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about standing in your truth. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their success is valid, even if others don't understand it yet. Remember, you don't need anyone's permission to be successful. You just need the courage to own it. Until next time, keep building your empire, even if you're building it quietly.